AMC here, continuation of this garden shed. Got this little door to put the track on. We had a little thaw, so the snow started to melt. And of course, the way the grade runs, the water decides to run inside of this unfinished floor, leaving mud everywhere. So there's a little bit of frost in the ground this morning. Started the day about 28 degrees. So I figured I'd open up the doors. The sun's trying to come out now, thawing some of the remaining snow. We'll try to dry things out in here. The last week it's been pretty much a little river of melting snow passing through the shed. So it didn't really help for getting any work accomplished. So let's break out some tools. All of our parts are right where we left them a week or two ago on the table. I did pick up some weather stripping for around the door. So once we get the door done, we can do that. We've got the factory track. We've got the short little track rails that I plan on using for extensions. I've got some braces. Plan on modifying these to work as extensions. And we will give it a stab. Spring rods. The cable, I did pick up some 12-foot long cables to replace the factory 8-foot cables. So the original cables are probably going to be too short as I add another foot or 2 feet to my height. So we'll extrapolate out the directions of what they're calling for. Try a few modifications with what I think I need to tweak the original design to what I want. We'll see if this works. And here is one track modified, extended up. So this is what I had in mind. Now we're about 11 inches off those trusses. So rather than hanging down where I might whack it if I put something big in this 12-foot tall ceiling, those tracks are tucked up just a little bit higher. We'll see. So far the brackets seem to align. They kind of short you on hardware, so they only have you put one bolt in instead of going crazy with this. This was the coupling bracket I made out of another steel bracket, so I might have way too many bolts and hardware in that. We'll see. And then the black line down here is going to be my finished floor elevation. So once I get the floor finished off, whether it be more of that slag or we pour cement, I can always trim off that track if I find that's a little bit too low. But I just set a 4-foot beam level up on the ground, use that to get the elevation of my track for my finished floor height, and then I held off on doing that bottom hanger. I can always add that support in later. And working on this other side. Little temporary strap holding the support track up, or supporting the track up. And then I've already cut this leg down to the length I want. This is my intermediate bracket. So this is just another hardware bracket I've repurposed. The black lines, I got to cut that off with a cutoff wheel. I'll drill the holes in it, bolt that together, and then use that to couple these two pieces of track. That will extend just another 30 or 31 inches. 32 inches is my cut. So I'm not really moving the height that much, just another 2.5 feet. But like I said, 2.5 feet of headroom when you've got a 12-foot door on one side and you put an 8-foot door on the other, the odds of me backing something into that in the future are relatively high. So I'll take the extra effort right now to do some field modifications. And like I said, it's my own setup. So if things don't quite work out, I take it all apart and lower it back down to the manufacturer's recommended elevations. You can kind of do that when it's your own stuff. Outward appearances, I still have the house wrap on the outside. Cut down on some of the wind. Like I said, it's still a bit muddy out here. And I have a little corner piece to put on here, another corner in the back. And then I'm thinking up underneath here, I'll probably do rough sawn pine. Put some screen in that for ventilation, and then just put a faceboard on and trim that out. But most of the snow's gone. Sun actually came out. Clouds have all blown away. So, yeah, into February, but we still have a little ways to go before spring's here. Thanks for watching. I'll add more to this video because I still have this other side to do. So we'll get a finished product compilation. Splice it all together. A final section to the garage door. So modified this door just because that's what I do. Extended the track up with a kind of a homegrown do-it-yourself backwoods engineering. Do not necessarily like this setup on this door. The roller for the cable is about the cheapest version I've seen on any garage door. The bearing assembly is inserted in that little plastic piece that's just kind of wedged into that pocket. Doesn't really hold captive. The aluminum wheel tends to rub occasionally on some of the coach or carriage bolts. And this rod came in 2 pieces with a weird little coupling extension in the middle. And since it's only 9 feet, they weren't calling for a intermediate support there. So I do get a fair amount of deflection. The directions were really only calling for, well, from what I read, 1 screw in each one of the holes. So I put 1 screw in on one side and then reversed on the other side. The holes are indexed across. I guess I could run a 1/4 bolt all the way through them, but if I were to use the self-tapping screws like the directions are calling for, you put a screw in on one side, you go 180 degrees around the pipe. If you tried putting a screw in on the other side, your screw points are going to hit. So I might still take those out, drill them, or drill the other side and then run a 1/4 bolt all the way through it. Don't really like that. I do like the self-tensioner. So it is a little gizmo you stick on the end of this thing. This particular one is on the left-hand spring. This door only apparently needed 1 spring. So you take your cordless impact and you can wind up the tension. No longer do you have to put your torque rods inside of the pockets and spin this thing up by hand and risk filleting your throat open if one of those things kicks out. So that part is pretty slick. So the door also did not come with a lock. So I had to pick this one up aftermarket and stick that on. The door lock is up quite a bit higher than normal. So you can see the coupling that I put on here. And added about 30 or 32 inches, I forget what the exact measurement was, to the bottom of this door. Had to do a little bit of adjusting just to make sure that I still have movement with the door, so I'm not binding up tight against the frames. So all of that centered out pretty good. I did change out the original 8-foot cables for some, I think they were 10 or 12-foot door cables. So those are another thing that you've got to consider if you're modifying the original design and intent. I've got added some extra grab pulls here and threw some foam tape on it, because now the height of this door, I've got the spring wound up pretty good. Threw another piece down here for a door or a foot for closers. So I've got a pretty good amount of tension on it. Release the lock, let the door go, and it'll roll up about 4.5 feet by itself. It stays pretty well centered, so I'm not really getting binding here. The roller on this right side, that does shift over a little bit and is riding on one of those carriage bolts. So that grinding comes and goes, but I think I can add a collar onto the shaft. So where that shaft runs through that plastic or that steel bearing and that plastic sleeve, that whole pipe has the ability to shift left and right, probably 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch. And so right now it's shifted and it's grinding again. So some of that could be because that stupid pipe has got that much deflection. But if I get up there, I can pull that whole shaft over to the left just slightly, and that grinding goes away. So I think I'll probably just stick a hose clamp and a washer up around that torque rod and try to keep that thing centered. But otherwise, the door seems to go up pretty decent. Oh, I did throw a bottle cap, a big heavy plastic cap and bolt and nut up here to work as a parking brake, just to keep my door from going too far open, because the short little rope that came with this, I wouldn't be able to reach the door to get it put back closed. And now the track is 30 inches closer to the ceiling than it would have been with the factory stuff. I still have a little bit of trim work to do around the door. And then I've got to trim off some of this excess steel. I'll get the cutoff wheel in there, just zip that stuff off. But we were definitely late in the game with getting this stuff done for the season. Pull this down. Lock that up. We'll head outside. So now from here, we've got that brick mold with the rubber seal on it. That'll fill that gap around the door. We want the door close, but we don't really want it super tight. Otherwise, we're going to start wearing on the paint on the door. So we still want a little bit of movement, but we don't want it large enough where we're going to get critters crawl through it or a lot of wind blow through. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. It's a pretty equal gap that I can make up with those filler strips. And then sliding door, that turned out pretty decent. Again, I've got to fix the grade here to keep all the spring runoff from rolling into the building. But we'll come back, I don't know, 30 feet or 40 feet maybe. Chop all this sod out of here, bring in some sand, get a slope going the way I want. Get the clay out of here, bring in some good driveway gravel or some more of that slag stone. That seems to work pretty good for drainage. This side of the building, we got plenty of fall over here. I just got to do a little bit more grade work, and we'll get some vented soffit underneath here, and I got a fascia board to stick on the front. But with all this mud down here, my ladder isn't sinking in, or my feet are going to weigh 20 pounds heavier than they start out. And then the little mud lake runoff melted snow stuff. Come this summer when things dry out, I'll get the skid loader or the tractor in here with the bucket, cut that gravel or cut that grass and that sod out of there, open that drainage back up again so we can drive through there and keep the water rolling down. We end up plowing all of this stuff up underneath anyway. This turns into our garden. So the ruts and whatever we created during construction, those will disappear with the next planting. But otherwise, yeah, a little garden shed turned out pretty decent. Other than it's a muddy shed right now. We'll get a floor in here at some point, whether it just be bring in sand. I got a couple of elevations marked on the bottom here where the finished floor is going to end up going. But we'll deal with that as the budget allows. So thanks for following along with a little garden shed door project. Again, it's always best to follow the manufacturer's directions. If you are going to deviate from the directions, be prepared to undo everything you did and put it back the way it was supposed to go if it didn't work out. And this is the last part of the episode, I suppose, of hanging a modified door and track in the garden shed. So it runs up and down nice and smooth now. Got the track extensions on. Even added a little foam tape to the point where we're going to be grabbing with our fingers to open the thing, pull it up and down. And then let's step outside. Take a peek out here. So I've got the rest of the flashing around the door. So we're color matched now, covering up that raw wood edge. I left this side open so you can see the wood behind it. Your trim doesn't quite cover all of that. No big deal, because we're putting the color match weather strip up here. I don't usually run this super tight to the door. I want it just a little bit of tension on it. If you get it too tight, you're going to end up wearing through this material when your door is opening and closing. The point of this is when the wind's blowing, just to allow it a path to redirect rather than blowing inside your building. Again, this one's just a garden shed, so I'm not really that worried about super airtight. In fact, I even threw a air vent in here just to let the building breathe. And if I do tie some HVAC or ventilation or whatever in later, I'll incorporate that. I went with non-vented soffit in the front because I'm going to have plenty of ventilation. It's pretty windy yet. Plenty of ventilation down the sides. And then usually at the bottoms, I don't know if it's right or wrong or out of habit, I usually just miter this on a 45. So if there is any water shutting down this direction, it helps direct it off and away from the seal on the bottom of the door. Of course, I still have a lot to fill in here, and we still have to decide whether that's going to be gravel, concrete, or, I don't know, leave it this way, let the cats and the mice wander in and out. Last corner piece put on, and we'll give the building inspector a call, have them come out, sign off on this sucker, be done with it. All in all, nice little break from my day job. And I think the sweat equity I put into this was still money ahead versus paying somebody to do it. 1,800 square feet. That ought to give me a little bit of room to put some garbage in. Thanks for watching, following along, and leaving comments. It's been a fun project. Thanks for sharing the ride.